The salty breeze whipped through my hair as I approached the old lighthouse, its towering structure silhouetted against the setting sun. Nestled on the rocky cliffs overlooking the ocean, it had stood for over a century, a sentinel guiding ships through treacherous waters. Yet, beneath its majestic facade lay whispers of tragedy and tales of spirits that lingered long after the light had gone out. The locals spoke of the lighthouse keeper, a man named Samuel, who had tended the beacon alone for decades. One fateful night, a storm had ravaged the coast, and a ship had foundered on the rocks. Samuel had tried to signal for help, but the storm had claimed both the ship and its crew, along with Samuel's life. They said his spirit roamed the lighthouse, forever bound to the light he had once tended. As twilight descended, I felt a chill creep into the air, and with it, a sense of anticipation. I had come to the lighthouse to uncover the truth behind the legends, hoping to connect with the lingering spirit of Samuel and understand his sorrow. The path leading to the entrance was overgrown, wildflowers and grasses swaying in the wind as if beckoning me forward. I stepped inside, the heavy door creaking on its hinges. The interior was dimly lit, dust motes swirling in the air like tiny ghosts. My flashlight flickered to life, illuminating the narrow staircase spiraling upward. With each step, I felt the weight of history pressing down on me. The walls were lined with peeling paint and faded photographs of the lighthouse in its prime, showcasing Samuel in his uniform, standing proudly beside the light that had guided countless ships. A shiver ran down my spine as I imagined the sacrifices he had made, the lives he had saved. Reaching the top, I stepped into the lantern room, where the massive Fresnel lens had once refracted the light across the ocean. Now, the glass was clouded with grime, and the air was thick with the scent of salt and decay. I approached the lens, peering out at the churning sea below, the waves crashing against the rocks like the ghosts of lost sailors. "Samuel!" I called out, my voice echoing in the empty space. "Are you here?" Silence enveloped me, but then I felt it, a cold breeze brushing past me, sending a shiver down my spine. The temperature dropped, and I instinctively pulled my jacket tighter around me. My flashlight flickered again, casting eerie shadows around the room. Suddenly, I heard it, a faint, mournful sound, like a distant foghorn mingled with the cries of the sea. I turned toward the sound, my heart racing. "Samuel!" I whispered, half expecting a response. The air grew heavy, thick with a sense of urgency. I stepped closer to the window, scanning the horizon for any sign of the shipwreck that had claimed Samuel's life. The ocean roiled beneath me, and the sky darkened with ominous clouds. "Help me," the voice came again, clearer this time. It was low and filled with anguish. "Save them." My heart pounded as I realized that the voice was coming from the depths of the lighthouse, echoing through the walls. Without thinking, I hurried down the stairs, my flashlight beam bouncing off the walls, illuminating the passageways. "Where are you?" I called, desperation creeping into my voice. I reached the ground floor, my breath coming in short gasps as I searched for the source of the voice. "Samuel!" The air felt charged, almost electric, and I sensed a presence around me, swirling like the ocean winds. I found myself standing in a small room lined with old books and journals. A wooden desk stood against the wall, papers scattered across its surface, some yellowed with age. I rifled through the papers, my fingers trembling. Among the notes were accounts of storms, shipwrecks, and loss. It was Samuel's journal, his final entries filled with a mixture of hope and despair. "I must keep the light burning," one entry read. "Lives depend on it. But what if I fail?" Tears pricked my eyes as I realized the burden he had carried. He had fought to save others but had ultimately lost everything. Just then, I felt a cold hand on my shoulder, and I spun around to see a faint figure standing in the doorway. It was Samuel, his form translucent and shimmering, eyes filled with a deep sadness. "Help me," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the crashing waves outside. "The souls of the ship, they are lost, still searching for their way home." "Samuel," I said, my voice shaking. "I want to help. How can I save them?" He pointed toward the lighthouse's beacon, which had long been extinguished. "The light, it must shine again. It is the only way to guide them back." Without hesitation, I rushed to the lantern room. The old mechanisms were rusty, but I was determined. I began to clear away the debris, searching for any way to reignite the light. As I worked, I felt Samuel's presence beside me, his energy surging through the air. "Please," he urged, his voice growing stronger. "You can do it. They are waiting." With a final push, I managed to uncover a hidden compartment containing a spare lantern. I quickly set it up, filling it with oil and carefully adjusting the wick. My hands trembled with anticipation as I struck a match, lighting the wick. The flame flickered to life, illuminating the lantern room with a warm glow. As the light grew brighter, I felt a wave of energy wash over me. The walls of the lighthouse began to shimmer, and I sensed the presence of the lost souls gathering around. Their forms emerged from the shadows, ethereal and ghostly, looking toward the beacon with longing. "Thank you," Samuel whispered, his form glowing with a serene light. The sorrow in his eyes faded, replaced by gratitude. "You have done what I could not. You have given them hope." The lighthouse came alive with a brilliant light, the beam cutting through the darkness and reaching out to the sea. I stood in awe as the spirits of the lost sailors began to swirl around me, their expressions shifting from despair to peace. They moved toward the light, drawn in by its warmth, their forms slowly fading as they found their way home. "Goodbye," Samuel said, his voice filled with a gentle calm. "Thank you for remembering us." As the last of the souls departed, I felt a profound sense of peace settle over the lighthouse. The air lightened, the weight of sorrow lifting, replaced by a feeling of fulfillment. I had honored their memory and brought them the solace they had long sought. As dawn broke, spilling golden light over the ocean, I stepped outside, the lighthouse standing tall behind me. I took a deep breath, the salty air filling my lungs. The light had shone again, a beacon of hope amidst the shadows, and I knew that the spirits would forever be at peace. I left the lighthouse that day with a heart full of gratitude, carrying their stories with me, vowing to share their legacy. The ghostly lighthouse would stand as a reminder that even in darkness, there is always a light to guide the way home. The night was heavy with mist as I made my way toward the abandoned lighthouse perched on the rocky cliffs. The ocean roared below, waves crashing against the stones like angry spirits seeking solace. I had always been drawn to places steeped in mystery and legend, and the tales of this lighthouse were particularly haunting. Locals spoke of the lightkeeper, a man named Elias, who had vanished without a trace one stormy night, leaving behind an empty tower and an unlit beacon. As I approached the entrance, the door creaked open, almost as if welcoming me into its depths. The interior was shrouded in darkness, dust motes dancing in the faint light that filtered through the cracked windows. I switched on my flashlight, illuminating the narrow staircase spiraling upward. Each step I took echoed through the silence, a reminder of the lighthouse's forgotten past. Reaching the lantern room, I was struck by the sight of the immense Fresnel lens, its glass dusty and coated in cobwebs. I could almost imagine the glow of the light cutting through the darkness, guiding lost ships safely home. But now, the room felt desolate, the air thick with sorrow. I took a deep breath, summoning the courage to call out. "Elias? Are you here?" For a moment, only silence answered. But then, a chill swept through the room, and I felt a presence lingering just beyond the edges of my vision. "Help me," a faint whisper echoed, a voice filled with longing and despair. My heart raced. "Elias?" I ventured again, the name lingering in the air. The voice responded, clearer this time, filled with urgency. "The light, it must shine again." I felt a pull toward the lens, a connection to the lost lightkeeper. "How can I help?" I asked, my voice steady despite the fear clawing at my insides. Find the oil, reignite the beacon, the voice urged, fading with each word as if it were carried away by the wind. Determined to assist, I scanned the room, searching for anything that might help me reignite the light. I rummaged through old crates and dusty supplies, my heart sinking as I found nothing. Just as I was about to give up, I noticed a glimmer beneath a tattered tarpaulin in the corner. Pulling it aside, I revealed an old lantern, surprisingly well preserved, alongside a canister of oil. Hope surged within me as I set to work. I filled the lantern, adjusting the wick and striking a match. The flame flickered to life, casting a warm glow around the room. But as I looked up, I felt a rush of cold air, and suddenly the room darkened as shadows began to swirl. Elias! I shouted, my voice shaking. I lit the lantern. A gust of wind howled through the lantern room, and I sensed a presence materializing before me. Elias appeared, his figure hazy but distinct, eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and sorrow. You've reignited the light, he said, his voice stronger now. But it is not enough. You must remember my story. What do you mean? I asked, my pulse quickening. The storm took my life, and I was left here, bound to this place. My story must be told, or I will remain trapped forever, he explained, his form flickering like the flame before me. Understanding dawned on me. I will tell your story. I promise. As I spoke, the atmosphere shifted again, and I could feel the weight of his sorrow lifting slightly. You must know the truth, he insisted, his voice urgent. The storm was no accident. I was betrayed. My heart raced as I listened, captivated by his words. Betrayed? By whom? A rival lightkeeper, jealous of my success. He sabotaged my lantern, leaving me unable to warn the ships at sea. They perished, and so did I. Only by revealing this truth can I find peace, Elias lamented. I felt a surge of determination. I will uncover your story. I'll make sure everyone knows what happened to you, I vowed, sensing his spirit brighten at my promise. Thank you, he whispered, and with that, he began to fade. But the storm, it still lingers. You must finish this tonight. The air crackled with energy, and I knew I had to act quickly. I hurried down the stairs, my flashlight guiding me through the winding corridors of the lighthouse. I reached the base, where old maps and records were scattered across a dusty table. I began searching through them, hoping to find something that could expose the truth. After what felt like hours, I stumbled upon a worn ledger, its pages filled with notes and accounts of ships that had passed through the area. As I flipped through, one name caught my eye, James Thorne, the rival lightkeeper. My pulse quickened as I read the details, suspicious behavior noted during storm warnings. Several ships reported erratic signals from his lighthouse. A rush of adrenaline coursed through me as I realized I had found what I was looking for. This was the proof that could vindicate Elias. I quickly took photos of the pages with my phone, determined to share this information with the world. But as I finished, I felt a chill run down my spine. The wind howled outside, and I turned to see Elias standing before me again, more solid now, his expression serious. You must leave, he urged. The storm approaches. It is not just a storm of the sea, but one of spirits. I felt a knot of fear in my stomach as I turned toward the door. I won't leave you here, I said, glancing back at him. I am bound to this place, he replied, sadness etching his features. But you have the power to set me free. Finish your task, and I can finally rest. With a heavy heart, I nodded. I will tell your story, Elias. I promise. I turned and fled the lighthouse, the wind whipping around me as I made my way down the cliffside. As I reached the shore, I could see the waves crashing violently against the rocks, a storm brewing in the distance. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the lighthouse behind me, the history and the spirits that lingered within. I rushed back to my car and started it, adrenaline pumping through my veins. The rain began to pour as I drove away, the storm unleashing its fury. But even amid the chaos, I felt a sense of purpose. I would share Elias's story, ensure that his name was remembered, and that the truth about his betrayal would finally be told. As the lighthouse disappeared from view, I felt a warmth wash over me, a gentle embrace from the spirit I had encountered. "Thank you," I whispered into the storm, knowing that Elias was no longer trapped in his sorrow. With every mile I put between us, I felt a sense of liberation for both of us. The light of the lighthouse would shine again, not just as a beacon for lost ships, but as a symbol of truth and remembrance. And in that moment, I knew that the spirits of the past could finally rest. The sea mist clung to my skin as I approached the old lighthouse, its crumbling stone facade looming against the relentless waves. Tales of its keeper, Margaret, had always fascinated me. She had vanished during a storm long ago, leaving the lighthouse dark and silent, a haunting reminder of her sacrifice. Pushing open the heavy door, I stepped inside, the air thick with salt and decay. Dust motes danced in the beam of my flashlight as I climbed the creaking staircase, the echoes of each step reverberating through the stillness. Reaching the lantern room, I paused to take in the dusty Fresnel lens, its brilliance long extinguished. Suddenly, a chill swept through the room, and I heard a whisper, "Help me." "Margaret?" I called, my heart racing. The light flickered as if urging me to act. Driven by instinct, I searched the room and found a tarnished oil lamp tucked away in a corner. Could this be my chance to reignite the lighthouse? Just as I filled it with oil, a cold wind blew through the room, and Margaret's voice grew clearer. The storm, it was sabotage. I was betrayed by Jacob, the fisherman. He wanted to extinguish the light to hide his illegal activities. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" I asked, feeling the weight of her pain. "I was afraid. I thought no one would believe me," she admitted. "Now I'm trapped in this darkness. I'll help you bring back the light and tell your story," I vowed, feeling a surge of determination. Margaret shimmered with hope. "You must hurry. The storm is coming." Without hesitation, I filled the lamp, struck a match, and watched as the flame ignited, casting a warm glow. "Now, to the beacon," she urged, her spirit growing stronger. I hurried down the stairs, urgency pushing me forward. At the base, I worked feverishly to repair the ancient mechanisms, my heart racing with each passing moment. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows, but I pressed on, driven by the need to free her spirit. Finally, I pulled the lever, and the lighthouse came alive, casting beams of light across the dark sea. "Thank you," Margaret exclaimed, her spirit brightening. "You've done it." But the storm raged outside, and I turned to Margaret. "What now?" "Tell my story," she urged. "Only then can I find peace." "I promise," I replied, feeling a deep connection to her plight. "You will be remembered." As her spirit began to fade, I felt warmth envelop me. "You have saved us both," she whispered before vanishing into the light. The storm howled outside, but inside the lighthouse, a calm settled. I descended the stairs and stepped outside, the first rays of dawn breaking through the clouds. I took a deep breath, ready to return to the village and share her story with anyone who would listen. But as I walked down the rocky path, a strange unease crept over me. The sea was calm now, but something felt off. I glanced back at the lighthouse, which still stood tall against the brightening sky. Just then, I caught a glimpse of movement near the top, a shadow darted behind the lens, fleeting and elusive. Driven by curiosity, I decided to return to the tower. The door creaked open once more, and I stepped inside, my flashlight cutting through the remnants of darkness. The air felt charged, as if the lighthouse were alive with energy. I climbed the stairs again, intent on uncovering the truth behind that shadow. Reaching the lantern room, I faced a figure I recognized, Jacob, his expression twisted by regret. "You shouldn't have come back," he growled, his voice low and menacing. "Why did you betray her?" I demanded, standing my ground. "You let innocent lives perish." Jacob stepped closer, the anger slowly fading into sorrow. "I was scared. I thought I was protecting my way of life." "You can't protect it by sacrificing others," I retorted. "Margaret was trying to save them." As the storm outside raged, I reignited the lantern's flame, illuminating the room. "Tell her you're sorry," I urged. Jacob hesitated, pain flickering in his eyes. "I'm so sorry, Margaret. I was wrong. I never meant for any of this to happen." Just then, Margaret's spirit returned, glowing softly in the light. "I forgive you," she said gently. "But you must let go of your guilt." With her words, the air shifted, and Jacob's form began to shimmer, caught between regret and longing. The lighthouse trembled as if echoing the turmoil within him. "Let her go, Jacob," I encouraged. "Find peace in your honesty." The lighthouse shook violently, and I reached for the lantern, feeling the warmth of their connection. As Jacob faced Margaret, their eyes locked, I could see the weight of years of regret etched into his features. "I never wanted this," he whispered. "Please forgive me." "I forgive you," Margaret repeated, her voice filled with compassion. "But you must let the past rest." As their spirits intertwined in the light, the storm outside began to calm, the winds dying down and the waves receding. The lighthouse stood tall, a guardian once more, and I felt the weight lift from its walls. I descended the staircase, stepping outside into the brightening dawn. I would return to the village, share their story, and ensure their legacy of forgiveness and redemption lived on. The lighthouse had witnessed their pain, but it had also witnessed their healing. Looking back one last time, I saw the lighthouse standing resolute against the morning sky, a symbol of hope. Margaret and Jacob were finally free, and the light would guide others home, illuminating the darkness for generations to come. The lighthouse stood alone on the rocky cliff, its silhouette stark against the twilight sky. Locals whispered of its haunted past, where the ghost of a keeper named Thomas roamed the halls, forever searching for the shipwrecked souls he had failed to save. Intrigued by the legend, I decided to explore the lighthouse. As I approached, the wind carried a salty scent, mingled with something metallic, like old blood. I pushed open the heavy door, which groaned in protest, and stepped inside. The air was stale, thick with dust and forgotten memories. Climbing the spiral staircase, I could hear the distant crashing of waves below. Each step creaked underfoot, echoing through the empty tower. When I reached the lantern room, I was greeted by the vast expanse of the ocean, dark and foreboding. In the center of the room, the massive Fresnel lens stood, dimmed and covered in layers of grime. Suddenly, a cold draft swept through, causing the light to flicker. "Help me," the voice was faint but unmistakable. My heart raced as I scanned the room, trying to find the source. "Thomas?" I called out, unsure if I was losing my mind. "Is that you?" The air thickened, and a figure began to materialize in front of me, a tall man with sorrowful eyes and a weathered face. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice a haunting whisper. "It's dangerous." "I came to understand your story," I replied, trembling slightly. "They say you haunt this place because of the ships that perished." He nodded, sorrow etched into his features. "I failed them. A storm came, and I could not guide them home. I watched as the ship sank, and their cries still echo in my mind." "What happened that night?" I asked, drawn in by his pain. "The lighthouse was sabotaged," he explained, anger flaring in his voice. "Someone wanted the light extinguished to smuggle goods along the coast. I tried to warn the ships, but it was too late. Who did this to you? I pressed, feeling a chill creep down my spine. Jacob, he spat, bitterness seeping into his tone. A fisherman who sought profit over lives. He wanted me silenced. My mind raced with the implications. And you're trapped here because of that betrayal? Yes, he said, his voice heavy with despair. Until the truth is revealed, I cannot find peace. Determined to help him, I took a deep breath. What can I do? Reignite the light, he said, hope flickering in his eyes. Let it shine for those who were lost. Only then can I confront Jacob and free myself from this torment. I moved to the lantern, heart pounding with purpose. I found oil and matches stored nearby, remnants of a time when the lighthouse was alive. Carefully, I filled the lamp and struck a match, the flame catching and illuminating the room. As the light grew brighter, I felt the air shift. The shadows seemed to retreat, and Thomas's form became more defined. Thank you, he said, his voice stronger now. Now we can find him. With the light shining brightly, I felt a surge of energy. Where do we go? Follow the beacon, he instructed, pointing toward the ocean. Jacob must see the light to understand the weight of his actions. I stepped out of the lighthouse, the beam cutting through the darkness, illuminating the shoreline. The waves crashed violently, but the light seemed to calm the chaos. In the distance, I spotted a small fishing boat, its sails flapping wildly in the wind. Jacob! Thomas called, his voice echoing across the water. Come back. The boat veered, drawn by the light, and soon it was anchored at the shore. A figure emerged, drenched and disheveled. It was Jacob, his expression a mixture of fear and confusion. What have you done? He shouted, eyes wide with realization. You shouldn't have lit the beacon. Thomas deserves to be heard. I yelled back, stepping forward. You can't hide from your past any longer. Jacob hesitated, then looked at the lighthouse, its light unwavering. I didn't mean for anyone to die, he muttered, voice shaking. I thought I was protecting my livelihood. By destroying lives? I pressed, feeling the weight of Thomas's grief. You sacrificed others for your gain. Face the truth. The storm intensified, wind howling as if the lighthouse itself was calling for justice. Jacob's expression shifted, guilt flooding his features. I was afraid, he confessed, tears brimming in his eyes. I thought I could control it all. Control doesn't come from darkness, Thomas said, his voice strong. You need to confront your choices. Jacob took a step back, his shoulders trembling. I'm sorry, Thomas. I never wanted to hurt anyone. As the lighthouse's light washed over him, I felt the air grow heavy with tension. You must let go, I urged. Only then can Thomas find peace. Jacob's eyes met Thomas's, and I could see the conflict raging within him. The storm outside began to calm, but the shadows of their past lingered. Tell him, I encouraged. Let him know you regret your actions. I'm sorry. Jacob shouted, voice breaking. I never wanted this. Please forgive me. Thomas stepped forward, his form radiant in the lighthouse's light. I forgive you, he said, his voice steady. But you must change. Let the light guide you. As Jacob absorbed those words, the weight of years of guilt seemed to lift from his shoulders. The lighthouse trembled again, but this time it felt like a release. I'll do better, he promised, tears streaming down his face. I'll make it right. With that, the storm clouds parted, revealing a sky filled with stars. The air was still, and the light from the lighthouse shone brighter than ever. Thomas's spirit began to fade, a peaceful smile gracing his lips. Thank you, he whispered. You freed us both. As he vanished into the light, I stood on the shore, feeling the warmth of the lighthouse envelop me. Jacob, now changed, looked back at the tower, gratitude filling his gaze. I will honor him, he vowed. I will tell his story. As dawn broke, I made my way back to the village, ready to share what had transpired. The lighthouse stood strong behind me, its light a beacon of hope, guiding lost souls home and illuminating the darkness for generations to come.